Okay, this weekend edition, we're going to talk about how to create a new campaign setting. So the whole concept I'm going to use is board game. So Hero Quest board game. So I do have other videos on this as well, but I'm going to introduce it as a campaign set for things like Dungeons and Dragons and or Pathfinder. So in the Wandering Monk character expansion pack that you get the Wandering Monk, you do actually get a map. So like if you want to pause the video to kind of take a screenshot, you do have this little scroll that you get with the world map. So in a sense, this is kind of like as you can see, the tournament. On the back, you get like a kind of like the World's End tournament, like heed the call to, like think of like Mortal Kombat type of deal, but you actually do have a world map to kind of build from. So now what's great about this one is it's blank, so you can in a sense gives you a lot of leeway to be able to name your own cities and pretty much like able to like not only name your cities but place like a where's where of like a character classes like elven nations, dwarven nations, you name it. So like as I try to unfurl this a little so it doesn't keep folding up. So like for instance, like you could place your dwarven nations here, which traditionally dwarves are like mountainous regions. So like, and then you can make forests like right in here for like elves or something. You can make humans and like of course the island nation for like the monk character himself, like in the idea of the Hero Quest board game comes from. So you have like ideas to come from. So now with the actual quest books, like with this is the base game quest book. Now of course, being a board game, it tends to be like a dungeon crawl. So the whole like idea behind like this is being, as I like show like the blank slate of the board. So like each of the quests, I'm not going to necessarily show them each quest here, so that way I don't spoil quests for people who actually have yet to play the board game or who are currently going through it themselves. So this is like the blank slate of the actual board for Hero Quest. Now of course it's geared as like a dungeon crawl, and of course I'm sure most people that are familiar with D&D first edition and way back in like the 60s, back in the 70s, and so when it first was introduced kind of like as like a dungeon crawl and everything. So you could harken back to the roots of dungeon crawling, but like what you can do is like in a sense with each of these quest books, what it does is it gives basically like a text on like at the beginning, and then what it does is like at the end it gives like a, I mean here you see like all the monsters and stuff, but it actually gives text and like, okay, these are like, you just finished the like in this one original 14 quests. So now there are expansions, so like for instance, like we got Keller's Keep, and then like Return of the Witch Lord. This is as a kid the main storyline, and the Return of the Witch Lord as a like these were the two I played as a kid, but like with the Kellar's Keep I was aware of as a kid, so I kind of wanted to get into that. So now with the other expansions, we got like the Mage of the Mirror, the Rise of the Dread Moon, Frozen Horror, Spirit Queen's Torment, Prophecy of Telor, and the like most recent one that's come out against the Ogre Horde. Now, the Jungles of Delthark has been announced, and it is coming out. Like, I mean, I'm recording this in July, and is as far as I know, it is slated to come out in August, September, and like the way I remember hearing it worded, it's going to be released based on your location. So I'm assuming that. Now, of course, this is an assumption. I could be proven wrong that like in August is going to be released here in the States, because with stuff like this tends to be like the bigger market for stuff like these board games and everything. So, in my limited knowledge, it makes sense to release this in August and everything, but that's not the point of this. So, the point of this is like using the map here that I showed, plus like all these expansion books, is to kind of like get the idea of like or quest books, is to give the idea like, okay, how do we take a board game and shift it into a tabletop role playing game? So the whole concept is like with like the, for instance, the four main characters that you have in the original quest line: the barbarian, the wizard, the elf, and the dwarf. You can take like the idea, the four party. I like my ideal party video, like the four characters. Of course, you can also expand it to six. Take that kind of concept with these quest books being dungeon crawls. What you can kind of do then is kind of flip the script and be like, how do I take a dungeon crawl and make it into a coherent storyline? So there's 14 quests in this, and so what you can do is with each quest is in a sense a standalone quest and everything, but it does tie into like a whole broad storyline in essence. So like with the base game with the 14 quests, what you can do is, for instance, use Mentor as like one of the counselors in the capital city of the human lands, and Zargon is the big bad evil guy. So Mentor brings you the heroes in like, hey, look, Zargon is looking to. You can introduce Zargon as like as the lich or something, like a sort of like Vecna. Okay, he or like harken to like World of Warcraft with the Lich King, how Arthas became like the leader of the undead and everything. So kind of use a concept like that. Okay, here we have our big bad evil guy Zargon, and he's trying to harness the undead and like harkening with like the World of Warcraft, kind of merge those ideas together. Like, okay, so we now have an undead army trying to invade and take over the realms of good and everything. So Mentor, being one of the counselors to the king of the land, brings you the heroes together to kind of counteract this growing evil. Of course, Zargon doesn't necessarily have to be a lich. He could also have been like the top advisor to the king himself, and he's like a rogue wizard, a rogue sorcerer who's like a level 20 character. And the whole concept is now you go on these quests and everything. You use the quests themselves. Like, okay, so you start off as level 1 characters, and Mentor sends you off on a trial. Like, hey, look, we have like this in the first quest of the trial. You can look at the previous video too that I've done. We have this gargoyle, or you could substitute like maybe a hobgoblin or like a ogre or or whatever. Substitute like a lesser big bad evil guy for the first quest, and like, okay, look, we're calling together heroes. We need someone to kind of infiltrate the evil lands of the Zargon. So, like, for instance, harkening back to the map, you could say, okay, the evil lands are down here. Our capital is over here. We need to send heroes here, but we need to test their mettle and everything. So, we're going to start striking at the outposts and stuff. So, we're going to send you the heroes on like a trial to create to in a sense defeat Varek, the gargoyle, one of the lieutenants of Zargon. And then in the quest 2, then you kind of you find out that one of the champions, Rogar or Ragnar, one of the knights, has been captured. So now you're sent off on a rescue mission, and you use each subsequent quest as like in a sense an adventure, or like one session, and you go through and building upon with each of the quests and everything. You build upon an ongoing campaign to kind of instead of just doing the traditional dungeon crawl for each quest, you then open up the map. And so instead of you could quite possibly use the first quest as a dungeon crawl to kind of introduce it and everything, and then of course the second one doesn't necessarily have to be a dungeon crawl. You could go to I'm thinking of Skyrim. Go to maybe a bandit camp that's just outside. where you do the first quest and then you build upon that, and then like for like as I quickly flip through and fumble through stuff. This and the quest 3 is Lair of the Orc Warlord. So maybe you find that after you rescue Sir Ragnar, the knight in quest 2, he says, "Hey, look, we were ambushed by a bunch of orcs, and their lair is like over in this section." So then you go off and onto like an overland quest type of deal for the third quest, and you take the ideas and the concepts of the each actual quest that are in these quest books, and you use them as like individual like adventures. And of course, you could do them as one shots, or you could like sit there and time and together, like maybe like for going back into the beginning with like Varrock, maybe like you find like the I'm thinking of like the Age of Ashes, where like you're maybe you're in the room, it's you're in the town council, like, or you're in the council chamber, and you're coming together with Mentor, and you're attacked by like an evil guy, and then you chase him down into like maybe the sewers, and you face Varrock the Gargoyle, which then leads you to maybe outside the city to try and chase down maybe like Sir Ragnar, to rescue him, as he was just recently as you go through the sewers, he's captured, and then you like he accompanies you. He's captured while you're going through the sewers. Then you go off onto like the rescue mission as like a chase scene type of deal, and you build off on that and everything. So like the whole concept of like bringing a board game that's tradition like that's geared towards a dungeon crawl, switch ideas so that way like you can bring it to the tabletop, and you're not just doing dungeon crawl after dungeon crawl, because like it can get kind of repetitive and boring if you're doing just dungeon crawls all the time. And of course, but what's great about board games like this is that like it can be a great introductory for like gearing you into the tabletop role playing games, because the rules and stuff are so much easier. But like the whole concept of like me like rambling on and kind of like fumbling through my thoughts and like ideas and speaking about it is, how do we take a board game that's geared towards dungeon crawling and bring it into like a tabletop, and like actually expand it into like a campaign that can last from like levels 1 to 20. So for instance, like you could do all 14 quests, tie them together, and for maybe into like a 2 or 3 sessions. Think of going back to Age of Ashes, like you do, and this would be like a book 1, like compared to like the Hell Knight Tale or whatever. And then what you do is you start pulling in. You have like events based, and so like once you get through like in a sense like book 1, like Hell Knight Hill and the Age of Ashes, you then go into like say book 2, which gets like it's based directly on the events that just finished. So then you go into book 2 in Kellar's Keep, and then you have to go rescue the king who was who had like a surprise attack from Zargon and everything. As my cat decides he wants attention, so it's like, yes, and I am going to say, get into this. Yeah, you want them to, huh? Anyway, so that this is kind of like me kind of rambling and kind of like incoherently talking about how we bring in like a table, like a board game into the realms of D&D and Pathfinder, and basically creating our own world, and like bridging the gap between board games and TTRPG. So if you like me, or a fan, like had played Hero Quest as a kid, which was an introductory to me for D&D, and now most recently Pathfinder, then you can like okay, here's an idea, here's how we can go about it, and here's kind of me kind of rambling and kind of like going on and being like, okay, here's an idea to bring a board game into the whole TTRPG realm.